Hey, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini. I post weekly videos right here on my YouTube channel, and in this video, we're jumping right into video number 2 of my free motion quilting series. If you're joining us new to this free motion quilting series, remember you can always click right there and that will take you to the entire video playlist. That way you can watch every video in the series from beginning to end. In this second video, we are going to jump right in and practice some straight stitches, some straight lines on our machine, or on our quilt sandwich I should say, and to kind of get a feel for the speed at which you're sewing for free motion. Alright, so we're starting off with a quilt sandwich, and so the way this works is it's a sandwich because we have batting sandwiched in between it, the same way that you would be quilting a finished quilt. But I like to just make small sandwiches, and this way you can test it out and see what your stitches are going to look like, what your tension looks like, and see if you need to tweak your specific machine before you actually jump in and start doing all kinds of really pretty designs. So I have a layer of fabric, then I've sandwiched in between a layer of my batting and another layer of fabric, all right? So you can spray baste them together, you can hand baste them, you can pin baste them, whatever your usual method is for putting your quilt tops and your quilt sandwiches together on a regular quilt, go ahead and do the same thing for your sandwich. Then aside from that, what I did was take one of my straight quilting rulers and a black marker. It can be permanent or not, whatever you want it to be. This is just practice. And I just went through and drew some straight lines right on my fabric piece here. If you're wondering what size to cut out your fabrics for your quilt sandwich, your practice piece, I like to use fat quarters. They work really nice, and that is about an 18-inch by 22-inch piece of fabric. Here I just happen to have a longer scrap, so I'm going to go with that. No big deal. We have our free motion quilt foot on. We have our 50 weight cotton. I have it on the top and the bottom. And now we're going to start doing some straight stitches, and we'll talk a little bit about speed. So first things first, let me show you how you want to start and stop your stitches whenever you're free motion quilting. Alright, so start and stop. First of all, we've threaded our needle, and I've brought up that bobbin thread so I have enough of a tail coming up, because we're going to need that now. So say I'm going to start doing some kind of crazy design right here. What I do is I hold on to the top thread that's coming out from my needle, and this machine has a needle up down, so I'm just going to put the needle down or up. If you don't have that option, just go ahead and turn the hand wheel and bring the needle down into your fabric. There it is. And now I'm going to bring it right back up. And what it does is it took one full rotation. So now when you tug on this top thread, there's what happens. It brought up the bobbin thread for me. So go ahead and pull them up. So you have the top thread and the bottom thread coming out right there from under your presser foot. And then just like if you were sewing your straight stitches on a regular sewing machine, you're just going to set those to the back. You can find your place right where you were again. And what I like to do sometimes is to kind of anchor down that initial spot where I came in by just doing a few more needle up downs, and that's just taking a few more stitches right in place, and that will help anchor those stitches, okay? And then that's how you start. Then you would do your free motion quilting, and when you go to stop, here's how you do it. We stop in our place. If you want to secure it at the end, right where you stop, just go ahead and do a few stitches, just 1 or 2 is fine, in the same spot. Then I like to bring the needle up, lift up my presser foot, pull this away from it so that I can bring myself some slack on this top thread. See how I did that? The thread that's coming through the needle, I gave myself some slack to bring it up and away. And then I'll go right back in that same spot and put the needle right back in it and bring it back up. Alright? And there you bring up the bobbin thread again. And because I took those anchoring stitches, I can just go ahead and cut it real nice and close to my fabric. And you get a nice clean finish like that without having to tie off any stitches on the back. Alright, so now that we know how to start and stop our stitches, let's do some practice stitches. We are going to just stitch right on the straight lines that we've drawn. So I'm going to come here to the top. We're going to start off just like I showed you, needle down, needle back up, lift up my presser foot and pull on that top thread to bring that bobbin up. So now I have my 2 threads in place. Place it so my needle is right above that same spot where I came in with the needle the first time. Take 2 stitches and leave it with the needle down. Bring your thread to the back and we're ready to start stitching. Now, when you're first starting off with free motion quilting, this really is a lot of it is what's comfortable for you and what works. Note number 1, I'm standing up. This is not ideal. This is not the best position to be free motion quilting. So if I'm planning to do a quilt, I would definitely not do it like this. But for the purposes of the cameras and this video, I am doing it like this. So sit yourself down at a comfortable position, a comfortable height, so your shoulders are not hunched forward, and just find yourself a comfortable spot. If you need to lift your chair up a little higher, drop it down, find a higher table, just work it out until you find a comfortable position. Chances are if you've been sewing for a long time in that same position and it doesn't hurt you, then you're probably going to be good to go then to stay in that same position for your free motion quilting. All right, so now we're going to be moving our quilt sandwich, and to follow this straight line down, I'm going to be moving it away from me. So what I recommend you start off doing is put your hands in kind of a U position, like this, and we're just going to slide it away from me so that the stitches can come down this way, okay? And I would like to start off with my speed on my machine. This machine has speed. I can control the speed from this little dial here. And I'm going to set it to about 50% of the speed because this is a pretty fast machine. On your machine, start off where you usually start off sewing and play around with it, and I'll show you what the difference is. But basically what I'm going to show you is how the speed at which you're moving the quilt sandwich through your machine directly relates to the size of your stitches, or how small or how big they are. All right, so let's show you some samples here. First, I'm going to do a nice consistent line. Notice at the speed that I'm going at. The key is to kind of keep it at one pace. You don't want to go super fast, then slow, super fast. Just try to keep it consistent, okay? So I'm coming down, I'm pushing the fabric away from me. And I'm moving the fabric pretty slow. The machine is going pretty fast. If you don't have a speed control on the machine itself, you want to just go ahead and either floor your foot pedal and then adjust how fast you need to move the quilt sandwich to get the stitches that you want. If that doesn't make sense, we'll get into it a little bit more. But let me put the needle up. I'm going to pull my thread back. I'm finishing it off. And I know it seems like a lot of steps to do this whole start-stop every time you do it, but if you get into the habit of doing it, you're more likely to do it in all your quilt projects, so it just gives you a neater finish, the start and finish. So if we're looking at these stitches here, they're really, really quite small. Some people prefer them that way. I don't. I kind of like to see the full stitch definition in every stitch. So this is a little bit too small for me. So if you decide that the first line you do as well is too small, here are the two different things you can do. One is speed up the way that you're sliding, pushing the quilt sandwich through the machine, or go ahead and lower the speed on your machine. If the machine stitches slowly and you're moving at that same pace, you're going to get bigger stitches, all right? So let me come here and show you. I'm going to do another line. And in the same line, I'm going to show you super tiny stitches, okay stitches, the way I like them, and then big stitches. So let's see if we can fit all of these in here. So again, I'm going to start the way I normally would. Okay, so super tiny stitches. Okay, a little bit bigger stitches. This is probably how I like them stitches. And these are going to be way too big. Okay, so let me bring my needle up. I'm off the edge here, so I'm just going to cut it. So now let's go over and let's review these stitches. These ones here are, ridiculously tiny. If you make a mistake and you feel like you have to go back and take those stitches out, this is not going to work because these stitches are too small. You won't be able to get a seam ripper in there, okay? Here they're kind of getting a little bit bigger. Some people prefer this kind of size. I like them to be just a little bit bigger. I like to see really defined stitches. And then if you look all the way here at the end, these stitches are like straight up basting stitches. They are so big, okay? So that's not going to work, okay? So the key here is to give yourself some of these exercises to practice. Do a bunch of straight lines, play around with it, find a stitch quality that you like, and then consistently practice to stay in that zone, like in that same movement. And if you want to, go ahead and mark on your machine or make yourself a little note, where your machine speed needs to be for when you're doing free motion quilting. The more comfortable you get, the more you play around with your settings and figure out what works for you, the easier it's going to be for you to free motion quilt, because then you'll be able to focus on trying out new designs instead of going back to the basics. So let's do another line here. Okay. And you can hear the machine going, you can see at the pace at which I'm moving, and that to me sounds like a good consistent speed. So those stitches are a little bit bigger. You can see on the back side here, They look good. And so when you're first starting off, there's no problem in you having some tighter ones, some smaller ones, a little bit bigger ones. You just don't want those really huge stitches. So just try to keep it consistent. And with practice, you're going to get more and more consistent to the point where people will think that your free motion quilting was done with a stitch regulator. And a stitch regulator is a device that some home sewing machines have, but then also most long arm quilting machines have. And the machine basically does the work of regulating the stitch length. So if you take a quick curve, it will make it whatever size you set the machine to. And then if you go slow, and you can go super fast right after, and they will all be a nice consistent length. I personally don't like to use a stitch regulator, either on this machine, I don't have one for it, or on my long arm machine. I prefer to do everything freehand. It's kind of zen. You know, you find a rhythm and you just go with it. All right. So we're just going to do one more here. I'm going to play around with my speed just a little bit more, because I kind of like my stitches to be just a little bit bigger. Now these are probably going to be too big, but you can start to see more of a stitch definition in there. And when we flip it over, you can see that as well. Okay, but this is not too bad. This is maybe looks like a 2.5, 2.6 if we're doing just straight stitches on our sewing machine. So just play around with that. Find a stitch quality and a speed that works for you, and continue to do those straight lines and practice getting a feel for the machine, holding the fabric down. If you feel like it's getting a little bit too stiff for you to move the fabric through the machine, then you definitely want to find another way to hold your hands or hold a quilt sandwich that will make it a little bit more comfortable. Because remember, that's pretty much what you're going to be doing the entire time, is pushing this quilt sandwich through the machine and doing all kinds of really fun decorative stitches. So that's it for this second video in my free motion quilting series. If you enjoyed it, hit it with that thumbs up below, share it across the different social media sites, and don't forget to click the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of my future videos. Thanks again for watching. Go practice your free motion quilting, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.